So there's this question
Mm.
I've been throwing about work. As you may have remembered from our conversation with the conversation I had with Daniel, and we touched a bit on work, but I've been thinking about it a lot since then. And what I'm really curious about, what I've been asking almost everyone, is what is your work? Oh wait, what what does work mean to you, first off?
Mm.
And what is your work? So that's that's generally the thing that I would like us to start around and sort of like see where we get with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think work traditionally, and for myself when I first started, was also like this notion of you go somewhere to do a task to complete a certain thing that you get paid for. And I think when you perceive work as a means to an end, it's different to how I perceive it now, where it's more than that. And I think the second part of the question you asked was, well, what's work for you? And that's when I feel to bring in the idea that work is more than just things to be accomplished. It's also part of our identity in that we like to be proud of what we do or what we achieve. And so I think with age, I found that I'm more inclined to go towards a work that gives me that satisfaction and that speaks to my values. So I want to be a part of something that is aligned with who I am and what I want to achieve. And so I'm intentional about what kind of work do I actually want to do that serves people? And the other aspect too, I think about is I want to be part of a work that I do enjoy doing because I know what it's like to do a job that you don't enjoy, or perhaps you don't really have the skills to accomplish well, and you're aware of that. And so having had a lot of jobs throughout my lifetime, I think when I look at the job I have now, and it's something I've reflected on recently, is that I really do enjoy what I do. Like there's a joy about it, and it's part of who I am in terms of my values and what I'm hoping and know that I'm leaving something behind. Like I'm making a difference right now, but being able to also impact the lives of those that I service, has been a really big shift in the way I think about work as well.
Mm. Wow,
Mm.
that's great. That's a lot there. And so if I was to play back a bit, what I'm hearing is you used to think it's something you just do. However, that has shifted to, a different interpretation now. So it's a bit more, you're, you're associating it more with your legacy, something you can leave behind, and trying to get it aligned with your values, things that you really, really live by. Um,
Mm.
yeah, that's what's coming through.
Mm.
Am I getting it?
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose when you consider that shift, I think then your energy also shifts. You know, you change the way you perceive it, but then your energy will back up your efforts, to then do the work because you're not just thinking of work out there and I'm doing because there's a means to an end, I get paid, but it's more about where my legacy lies, as you mentioned. And so it's like, oh, my whole energy is now geared towards that and focused on accomplishing that really well. Yeah.
So it's contributing to a building of your legacy.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. That's great. Like it completely resonates with me as well. Um, it, I don't, maybe the part where we differ is on the legacy aspect because I haven't factored that in yet, but very much more on the values. So
Mm.
same for me, like you've shared, it has evolved from a thing you do as, as a means to an end, uh, to become more, you'd say something that I cultivate my own excellence through. So I've come to discover that through the things that we're doing all the time, you can actually couple that with excellence cultivation. And so um, part of what I'm doing when I'm working is to sort of overcome the challenge of my current limits, to to sort of go beyond who I am, go be more than I currently am. And so with everything I'm doing, I'm wondering, how can I do it better? Is this the best that I can do? Um, or should I even be doing this? Is there something better I should be doing? And yes, it's all lining up. It all has to be aligned with my values, and it's
Mm.
all fitting into uh, enabling me to meet my ends that I need to meet. Um, but also uh, bringing the best of me and putting it on offer. So, so yes, it's sort of becoming like it has evolved from a task or a job to become more like a practice.
Mm.
It's getting to that level whereby, you know, when like you work in the medical industry, so you're very familiar with having to have a license and having to practice. Um, I think it's very similar to that, in that you go and cultivate a skill that you become very good at, and then you start practicing giving the
Mm.
gifts of that skill. And yes, sometimes that also gets you gifts returned. Uh, Not always, but that does not stop you from, let's say, continuing to practice. And at the very least, the gift on offer is through the practice itself, in that you're continuously improving and becoming better than you were before you practiced again. So yes, I that's what it has become for me. I don't know what what do you take from that? I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate how you shared because can sense that transition where I think when it comes to work and when we say work, um, there's always that mental idea that it's something, again, that you do. It's like you're working and it seems really hard and it seems like, like a dread. But then you described how you've evolved over time and been able to appreciate how you have the choice to align it with your values. As you've gotten older, you could pick and choose. And I think it's really important to make it clear that we're talking about, at a later time in life. Both you and I have worked for some time, and we have the privilege of choosing the type of work to some extent. And so, sure, there's the money factor, the income, because we have to sustain ourselves and our families, and that's fair for everyone. But also having the freedom to choose in terms of, you mentioned the values and the beliefs and aligning with where you sort of see yourself going. I think that's a really key aspect of being able to appreciate work in the here and now, in how we both are able to work at things that align with who we are in some sense. And so I just really wanted to highlight that. I think it's really important that everyone understands we're talking about the type of work that perhaps you're doing, which aligns with your values and beliefs. And perhaps if you're not in that place, maybe it's the type of work that you're hoping to do. And so if it's the type of work you're hoping to do, I think it's encouraging to know that every work you do is leading towards the type of work you do, or can be leading towards the type of work that you wish to do. And so when you're looking at work, I think if you have the perspective of, I want to make a difference, and you ask yourself the right questions, I think as clarity begins to reveal what that work looks like for you, then you're able to choose paths that will more easily lead you to that work that aligns with your values and feels really connected to who you are. And you're able to then leave, like you mentioned, the legacy. I think the legacy is also part of, the everyday, the mundane, because a legacy isn't just for the outside world to see. It's really for the families that we interact with, the friends that we interact with. It's the way that they see us in our mundane things. How do we show up? What kind of energy do we bring? And so how we approach our work is one that will speak to those people around us, in particular our children, and they can look up to us and say, oh, I really appreciate how my dad approached his work. And this is the line of work he did. And, he did it with excellence and whatever it might be. And I think legacy can also really be appreciated at that level. And then once we appreciate it like that, we're also more inclined and more encouraged to continue to work, as you mentioned, with everything you've got, to give it your energy, to give it your excellence, to perform at an excellent level and not just think, oh, I've just got to pay the bills or I've just got to get through this day. Yeah, I think those things really stood out for me. And I think when you ask yourself the questions and when you have the ability to sit with yourself and truly focus on what is my purpose? If I don't know my purpose, I'm going to do the work to find that purpose out, because there is no greater tragedy than living through a life that has no purpose, has no vision. So I think it's important to have a vision and a purpose, because your work is essentially, I think, really meant to be part of that. Like, you're not just working to be working. I think that every person was designed to leave a legacy, to have the next generation look up to them. And so do the work, find out what it is that your work is meant to be, and you'll find ways to and opportunities that will help align with that, that will also meet your financial needs and your, sustain your family and your ability to give back to the community, and all of that. But I think that's where it starts. And then appreciating that your legacy really is in the little things, and it's in the people around you and your family, your networks that are closely related, that the way you talk about work, the way you do work, the way that they see you in every day is there to build that legacy.
Wow, that's fantastic because I like how you brought it to the mundane, and it is true. Like it's as if life is in the slow moments, the slow little uh things that are always repeating. Uh, yeah, because that is where most of you'd say the work needs to happen. I like to use this analogy of the day, where you're trying to um, like you can only live one day at a time, right? It's like it doesn't matter how long you end up living. Uh, it, it's like this the place in time of your existence is the day, and you can project into the future, you can look back into the past, but you can only do that from today, from the here and the now. And because of that, all your work has to happen in that day. And so, and we've spoken about this before, like, I want to start, working on something. I want to do that. It's like the very first step is create space for it within the day. It's like you have a very limited day. There's already things happening in that day. So you have to, first of all, clean up your day and then find room for the thing you want to do and fit it in there, which now takes me back to the work you mentioned. You know, working hard to find out your work, like the work that builds your legacy, and I think that is part of it. It's like identify where in your day you're going to fit that, and then how once you fit it in there, how is that going to impact all the relationships, your family, your friends, your workmates. It's funny, like represent workmates, but they're just like colleagues you work with. And it's like, even your family are your workmates, and your friends are also your workmates because you're doing different kind of work with them. Like if you're a parent, like we both are, there's a lot of work we have to do with the children, and this is like by default, and like teaching the children, uh, trying to demonstrate the values that
Mm,
you're trying to help them rise up to. Uh, but also while doing that, paying attention to their health, introducing things like exercise to them, paying attention to their meals. Um, it seems as if there's a lot of attention paying required. It's like
mm,
for you to actually do the work, you have to pay a lot of attention, and we use that connotation, pay attention, because it is effortful. It's like
mm,
to keep your mind on the same thing, uh, to to keep fine tuning it again and again, because your mind
mm.
may get bored, but keeping it focused on the same thing is effortful, and that is work. And so it is important that when you do that, at least it's something you're choosing to do that, right? It's not something that maybe you're being forced to, or that you're sort of like doing without, any intention. And yes, there are probably people who are very early in their careers who might be watching this. But I feel like you still have to really work at having an intention. Like, let it not be an accident. Like, don't wake up one day and, oh my God, what am I doing? Uh, Try not to end up in that situation, because you can easily end up in that situation. You can easily end up wondering why you're doing what you're doing. Uh,
Mm.
and that would not be great. That is not the kind of work you want to be doing, or the kind of work that can lead you to, you know, can facilitate you to build a legacy. Um, yeah, I don't know. What do you think of those thoughts?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Because as you were talking, for me, when I think about, um, all the things you mentioned that we have to pay attention to, it can be really overwhelming. You've got your kids, you've got to think about their health. So you were talking about exercise. And of course, as the parent, it feels like all of that is up to you, especially when they're young. So it seems like a lot. And so you've got that bubble, and then you've got your work bubble, and you're like, oh, my boss expects this and wants this and wants that. And I think if we talk about the overwhelm of that, then we're saying that our power lies within the external. And so I think when we look at ourselves though, and recognize, actually, I have the power and choice to navigate through each one of these challenges really gracefully. Now, it doesn't mean that at the beginning you're going to not have challenges and you're not going to face opposition and have obstacles and all the difficulties that come with creating a life that you love. But if you have intention and you begin to analyze each situation and think about, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? And we're coming back to the idea of, you need to do the work. It's about sitting down and saying, where do I see myself in 5 years' time? Like, all of the actions you do today will one day speak of the person you become, because you're always becoming something. So where I give my energy is essentially what I'm saying or voting for to be a part of who I am in the future. And so I think if we shift that perspective and think of it that way, then we can say, okay, if I'm finding my home overwhelming, what is it that I can do, especially knowing that I have the power to change things? What is it that I can do to shift that? And a personal example is that my children attend Sienna attends the choir, Australian Girls Choir, and it's on a Thursday. It's after school. It goes for over an hour. It's exhausting. The other two sit in the car with me, and it just wasn't working. And so I really had to make a decision as to, is she going to engage in this activity in the future? And if so, what will I do to try and navigate this loss of time that seems to be wasteful? Because you're sitting in the car, you could be doing reading, you could be doing all the things, but it's kind of a confined space. If the conditions are not great outside, you kind of have no choice but to be inside. It's late at night. And so I figured, if I enroll Simeon into something and he's doing something at the same time, and I noticed there was a karate class there. I was like, maybe this would work because that means that he's in there, he's doing something, Sienna's doing something, and then maybe Savannah would be doing something else. And so it's about looking at what options do you have. And the more that you put options and the more that you really churn over those options, what is it going to look like? I do a time map. I look at my calendar. I think about the hours. So, how long does it take me to get there? And what am I going to do once I get there? And what are the opportunities that I have to utilize to my advantage? Because it really is just one night a week. It's not a big sacrifice. But if I thought of it as overwhelming and I discounted my ability to make a plan around that situation, then I probably would remove the kids out of all the activities. And I would just say, we're just not doing it. We're just going to be comfortable. We're just going to sit at home. We know our routine is great. We're eating on time. Perfect. But because I know where I want to go and because I know the outcome I want for my children in the future, I'm going to sacrifice this one day, this 1 hour or two, and say, no, we're going to mitigate around that and think about the options we have and really leverage the opportunities before us. Because in 5 years' time, you'll be a pro singer or you'll be, really good at karate. You'll have a skill that will be something you can be proud of and a hobby that will keep you from getting bored and all these things that, as a parent, you think about like, what's my child going to do? And it's valuable for them to have something that it's their own, right? And it gives them that proud sort of feeling and they can be like, yeah, I do this. And on the weekends, this is how I spend my time and I really enjoy it. And so I think that's one really good example to sort of think about. If I engage in work that isn't satisfying to me, what is the goal? What am I trying to achieve? And I think for everyone as humans, we have an innate desire to really achieve great things. And we have an innate desire that we are all born with to leave a legacy. Now, for each one of us, the legacy is going to look different, but it's still a legacy. You still want someone to appreciate the work that you did. You still want someone to appreciate the work that you're doing. And you still want, in particular, if you have children or family, you still want people to be proud. And that proud moment is what will speak when you're gone, right? Because if I'm leaving something, if people are proud of me, they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about the things I did well, and they're going to mention the strengths that I had. And so I think, having thought a lot about work and having had a lot of different jobs and sort of thinking, well, what's the purpose here? What am I trying to do? It puts you in a different perspective to really think about the options you have, to really think about the decisions you're going to make. Because again, I have a quote on my desktop and it reads that every action you take is a vote towards the type of person you wish to become. And no single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of a new identity. So who do you want to become? Because essentially when we talk about work, it really is at the core of who we are or who we're trying to become. I think, I don't know if that answers your question there.
No, it does. It does. And that's such a beautiful quote that you shared there at the end. And for me, it completely resonates. And I am in complete agreement with it. Because, most of the time we don't like to think that we are becoming someone else. It's very comfortable where we are. We always feel comfortable in ourselves and we believe we are what we need to be. It kind of feels like that, because, otherwise we would all be rushing off to do things to, become what we need to become. But I guess the challenge is staying who you are while working on becoming the next version of yourself. And that can be quite difficult. And, you'll see it, like you mentioned with the children. You enroll them into these activities. And, in some cases it goes great. They fall in love with them and it becomes their thing. They take ownership. But in some cases it doesn't take off and you have to keep searching for that which they were born with. And it's going to take work. And, it's like in the process of doing that, it's sort of like you're trying to put a limit on what they should focus to work on in the meantime, right? It's like, okay, you could do a million things, especially when you're young. It's like towards your oyster, you have so much potential. Could be anything right now. But of course, as you get older, the options are going to shrink and keep shrinking and shrinking, and until you find like there's very few things you're able to do and very few things you want to do. Um, so at that early stage, you, you as a parent or as a guardian, like you have this responsibility to set the limit for the child. It's like, oh, okay, what things should I expose this child to? They could do anything, but I don't have all the resources to facilitate that. It's like I want them to be a great streamer. I want them to be great with their music, to play an instrument, sports, and all sorts of many other things that you can think of. But the challenge is for every activity you sign up, that's going to be a cost, both maybe financially and time wise. And so you even if it's something that may not cost you financially, you still have to be there, uh, you know, to facilitate and make sure this is happening. And even if you found someone to do it for you, you still need to know where your child is, and you have to keep arranging this thing that's happening. So there is work to be done. And I guess sometimes that can get frustrating, especially yeah, especially as a parent. Like you can go, no, I'm not doing that. It's like I want I want to focus on me and just work on things for me because like they'll figure it out when they grow up, right? Which can be a disservice, and usually it's very sad when that happens. Um, but it does happen. It happens a lot. Uh, but I guess the point I'm trying to draw us to is if you're doing your work, like, and you're starting to get to a point whereby, it's sort of paying off, if I may put it that way. Like you're starting to see the positive side effects of all the extra effort that you've been putting in to cultivate yourself. Then now you start wishing that for everyone, not just your loved ones. It's like you want it for your friends. You want it for, these little ones who may not even know what it is or comprehend what it is going to be. So all of a sudden, it's kind of like you made a discovery. It was like, oh, wow, look, if I work really hard at something and I am being as diligent as possible, great things can happen. It's like, wow, that I could impact my world, like this world that I live in. I can actually impact it through doing these things. And I think that's why you it was also linking back to the legacy. It's like you can actually do something that withstands the test of time, and and once you learn how to do that, nothing's going to stop you. It's like you almost get possessed by the spirit of this legacy, and now you can't stop. You can't stop yourself. You have to keep going. Yeah, I was just reading a novel, um, Jeffrey Archer's As the Crow Flies, and it's a story about this man through his life, from the age I think of one or something or two till his late 70s, and everything he goes through in time. And interestingly, he started off as a vegetable merchant, right? Like in a box next to his granddad who is selling vegetables. And his whole life has had that theme. And he ends up, he builds this very big enterprise. It's like a very big organization, very big company, lots of, it makes a lot of money, but he retires from it because, he gets to a point where he can't run it anymore. And guess what he goes back to? He goes back to getting a barrow and selling, fruit and vegetables on the street, because that's what he really loves to do. It's like he loves the banter he has with his customers and just picking out the fruit, and he has always done life through this lens. It's like it's life to him is always fruit and vegetables and conversation with his customers. That, like in every situation, and that sort of like becomes his entire legacy. I know it's a bit of a fictional story, but I feel like we have to sort of believe in our work the same way this guy does. It's like we also have to learn to look at everything as our fruit and vegetables and our customers for every scenario we're in. And I think the more we do that, the closer we get to developing that relationship with our work. And then once that spirit of that work possesses us, then there's nothing to stop us. Like, we're driven by it. It's like we have a purpose. It's meaningful, and it's always driving us towards building that
Mm.
legacy that we're working towards. Yeah.
I really appreciate it because let's go back to something you said at the beginning was that um, there is, most people won't go out and do the work to find out what, they were born to do. I think there is a desire within all of us for more. And I truly believe this because I've seen it in research and I've seen it with, the courses I've done on self-growth. All of us yearn for more. A lot of us, though, are limited by the beliefs or the lies we tell ourselves. We're limited because it's like, oh, but it's going to be so hard. And I really wanted to do this. I really wanted to be that. But, I'm maybe too old or maybe time has passed and whatever. And I think every person wants to leave a legacy. Every person wants to have a job that they can be proud of and something that they can point to and say, yeah, I'm really, I've achieved my goal and I can tick that off. But I think it is those limiting beliefs, and there is those lies we tell ourselves, and the circumstances, of course, we find ourselves in. Some people may be in situations where, within the socioeconomic, they don't have those opportunities to pursue work that they truly love, and to pave a way for themselves that reaches the goals they've always perceived they could achieve. And so I don't want to discount that some people are in certain situations where it may be extremely difficult. And so it doesn't eventuate because, the area you're living in or the family you're in or whatever it may be. But there are challenges and obstacles. And I think one quote that I really love is that, it says something to the effect, and I can't remember exactly, but it says something to the effect of like, success is not a coincidence. Success is intentional. And so, and the other one that I really love is, failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So we want to be intentional with our lives because time passes really quickly. And you talked about the day, the time you have in the one day, wherever you want, if we take the one day and think about it in the hours we're given, it's really important to take each hour as valuable. Each hour is so valuable. And so when we perceive it that way and truly honor that, I think we make decisions that drive us towards the things that we want to do. But it's that intentionality we keep talking about. I have to be intentional to plan each day. I have to be intentional to think about what do I want to occur in my day? What do I want to happen? And how is that helping me with my future and where I'm going? Now, I think that there is no challenge with becoming more. You mentioned something early before that said something like, people want to stay the same. I don't think we need to stay the same. I don't think we want to stay the same because if we're trying to pursue the work that we're born to do, but we're also challenged by staying who we are, then you can't pursue the work that you want to do because you must transition with that work and become a better version of you every single day. And so as I'm pursuing the work that I love and I know that I was called to do, and when I find that out, I want that work to transform me and I want that work to evolve me because I want to be doing that better each day and transform not only myself, but that transformation then empowers others and it inspires them to know that, hey, you can go from where I started, you can go to where I am. And for myself, I've always been one, and I have an affirmation that I say every day is that I'm really proud of myself for always growing and transcending, because I don't want to stay the same. And I think that we're always becoming. The question isn't, am I becoming or am I changing? The question is, what am I changing into? What am I becoming? Um, and then you spoke about the kids, and I think with kids, it's so true that they can, change their mind about what they're doing, or find interest in other things that, apart from what maybe they were initially doing. With my kids, I try to collaborate. I think it's really important to get them on board and say, well, how about, especially when they don't know, like my son is really young, so he doesn't know what he's wanting to do. So I just say, these are the options. Like, we could do this, we could do this. What do you think? And if he goes, oh, I don't know, don't really care. Well, then let's try them out. Like almost every sport has a tryout or a free class. You don't even have to pay for it. You can just show up. They show you how to do the thing. And like with the karate, they give them 2 free lessons, full 1-hour lessons that they get in over 2 weeks. And they can attend and see how they go. Do they like it? Do they feel like it aligns with them? And do I, as a parent, feel like they're going to do great, or they're going to have a great time and enjoy it and get something from it? And so I think when you collaborate with them, and of course, consider what your situation is. Am I in a good position financially to be able to cover this? So what is it going to cost? Am I in a good position time-wise? But I think when you know where you're headed, for myself, I think I also have this ability to read children. I'm really good with just, I don't know, when they were born, I just perceived them as, I couldn't get away from this sensation I had that they are this, I don't know, sacred thing. And so I've always carried that when I've brought them up, and I've always carried that, like, they are so sacred, like, I don't want to mess with this. And so as I've grown as a mother, I take their input, I take where they're at seriously, and I consider what do they need from me. And I value that in my life as part of my work. And so when you think about your work and you think about all the responsibilities you have, for me, I go, okay, my work is I need to pursue the things I was born for. What is that legacy going to look like? But that legacy is also part of how I parent. It's also part of how am I going to be a friend? And I've really worked hard in the last few years to really focus and intentionally work at becoming a better person, becoming a better version of myself, to be able to give to all of those situations and those lanes that are in my life. And I think, yeah, it takes work at the beginning, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be painful. And there are moments that you're going to be like, this is too much. But again, just keep reiterating and reminding yourself, well, where am I headed? What do I want to be? What am I going to become? Because, it's that compound effect. You can do a work, but where is that work leading you? And if you don't ask the question, you're going to haphazardly end up in a position where, oh, I didn't want to be this person. Oh, I didn't want to be in this situation. Well, we need to ask the question, and wherever you're at, ask the question even now. It's never too late to reorganize your life, to reimagine, and to ask yourself, is the work I'm doing getting me closer to who I am going to be, who I want to become? And I think that question is important, because sometimes we ask the question of, what was I born to do? Well, what you're born to do is also tied into who you're born to become. I think that's really key, because you cannot do a work that is satisfying to the soul, that is part of who you were born to give of, and not become a different person, not become that person. So you could ask it 2 ways: is what is the work that I'm, blessed or gifted with or born to do and accomplish? But also, what do I want to become? Because every decision then, if filtered through those 2 lenses, will really shift the way you think, the way you plan, and the way that you make decisions.
Yeah, it's great. And I like what you've said there about, that question about what have I been gifted with? What am I meant to become? And to pick up on the gifting aspect, I feel like even with our work, it's like we have to learn to gift ourselves. Because we do have gifts, like we all have gifts. We may be aware of them, we may not be aware of them, but they're there. And if you ever watch anyone for long enough, you can see their gifts. and they may not be particularly aware of them, or they may not know how to articulate them, or how to, you'd say, hone these gifts and practice them in a way that can sort of like multiply them. But they have them. Like everyone has their
Mm.
gifts. Um, and so I'm thinking like, you know, when I had you share that, I was like, yeah, we have to, we, we have to cultivate a way that allows us to gift what we have, you know, to gift our ourselves to others, which sort of takes me to, it reminds me of you know, Jesus when he was starting out his mission, right? Uh, he goes out to the outskirts of the city. He goes to these um, you know, outcasts, and they're living a life of suffering. It's like there's a lot of struggle, you know, it's not a great life that they're living. That's probably one of the reasons why they got kicked out of the city. But he goes to them and he gifts them himself. It's like, I can give you a, a part of who I am, like the person that I am, and I can give this to you. And the way he does it is by living with them and partaking
Mm.
in what they're doing, practicing with them, and you know, confronting whatever they're confronting. You know, he gets in the boat to go fish. I mean, he's been raised as a carpenter. he's he's not a fisherman, right? But he has his way of. It's kind of like he's discovered his method of approaching everything that allows him to gift himself. And it's not really about the skill or about how great he does it in comparison to everyone else doing it. It's more about how well he applies himself to doing it, you know, to achieve his best that he can as him. And so he goes fishing and he influences the fishing and something else happens. It's kind of like,
Mm.
oh, okay, this guy, what's all about him, right? It's like, everywhere he's going, he's doing things different. And part of it is because he wasn't, I would say, overly conscious about his method of doing things,
Mm.
right? And he would
Mm.
just give the best that he can and that he knows how to give. And you can start to see a bit of that theme even in you know, in the Gospels. Like reminds me of the lady who comes to, you know, when they're watching people tithe in church, and this lady gives everything she has, right? And you have all these other people who have a lot and they only give a little bit. But this lady gives all of it, and he goes like, see that lady? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You have to do that. And it's as if in our work we're being called to give our, all of it, the best that we can. And it's it feels like it's only when we get to that limit of the best that we can, that we know we can, that we get to that limit, that horizon, that we can now see what, how farther we can go. It's like we have to
Mm.
exhaust our current ability before unlocking uh, the next potential. And you're going to do this in repetitions. Like you have to continually improve until you exhaust your current capability so that you're ready to take on more because you've ramped up all the way to whatever you already had. Like you have given all the gifts that you had. So you're ready now to sort of like experience the next level that allows you to even give more. Surprisingly, even in the, you'd say in biology, they've researched this. It's as if like every time you you participate in doing something uh, at a different level, it's like even your biology changes. It's like you physically change yourself, like your genetics, some genes are turned off, some new genes are turned on because, you know, you've exhausted that capability and now you're ready to pursue kind of like new abilities, which you always had the potential to. And I think, yeah, it's like we have to find that horizon, like our horizon of who we are, which is what you were talking to before
Mhm.
about, surpassing ourselves. Like we have that innate desire to become better. We know it. But I think how we bring it to fruition is by emptying out all the gifts that we have to the best of our ability. And once that's done, then we have the opportunity to do more of that because all of a sudden, what else we can do will reveal itself.
Mm, I love that because when you do expose the gifts you have, and just to go back a little bit, if someone doesn't know what their gifting is, I think it's really important to sit down with yourself and to ask these questions. And one thing that I found for myself is that I navigated through all of my 20s and my 30s thinking, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no purpose, because you're constantly faced with, well, what are you going to do for work? Or, why? Oh, what's your career? And so you kind of feel like, I have to overperform or, my job is not that important. All the things that as a society we've sort of set as the prevalence, right? When we talk about work. But I think one really cool thing you mentioned at the end is that, if you exhaust your capabilities, well, your capabilities lies within what you do every day, right? And so if you look around yourself and if you notice, well, what do I really maybe enjoy to do? Or what am I thinking about? Or what are the things that I just know within me, like, this is what I'm drawn to, right? But then if you're like, oh, I still have no idea what I'm going to do, then sit down with yourself and have some really honest conversations, have some really tough questions. And one thing I found is that if you consistently ask until you get a clear answer, you're going to get an answer. Like you're just going to get an answer. And whether you believe in the universe or God or whatever it is, it's going to speak to you because you're asking a question. And when you're open-minded to receive the answer in whatever way that it may come, it will come. And so that's really key that okay, I got a little bit of something. Maybe there was an inclination that I should, maybe do a trade. Great. Then pursue that. So it's what you do with what you have, right? If I know my gifts and talents, or if I know that I'm drawn towards something, then I must engage in that work and I must be intentional, right? We talked about intentionality, but also, are you willing to take some steps forward to pursue that thing? Because it's one thing to know what you can do. It's another thing to actually do it. And it's in the doing, you were talking about how our genes can evolve. Yes, because if I'm doing it, then my body is learning this new language, this new trait. And then my cells in my brain are forming new neurons that are connecting to allow me to, through doing and through knowledge, I can perceive differently. And so that evolves over time. You spoke about how, we grow with our work. And I think that's so key. We grow with our work and then we can pursue more work and different work and really get to the heart of what is it that I want to do for the rest of my life. And some people find it sooner than others. And I appreciate I think it's really important to note that there's a different process for each person. And I think you spoke about exhausting. I think you never really exhaust because as you pursue the thing that is here right now, then that thing grants you energy to then pursue the bigger thing. It's like, oh, if I could do that, oh, I wonder what I could do now. Like it just grows with you. And there's that, renewed energy to then pursue that thing and to see it to end. And it's the same in we talked about the hours you get in the day or the routine and thinking about, well, all these things are yelling at me and the responsibilities and it can be overwhelming. But if I know what thing is going to take my energy and I plan and I'm intentional and I'm like, okay, this thing is really going to take my energy. So I'm not going to plan anything else before or after. And if I know my life purpose or my work, then I'm going to know how to also protect myself because to sustain you to the grander things and the things that you really wish for, you must also know how to sustain yourself. And I think that wisdom comes when you are taking the steps to pursue the work that either you enjoy or you're like, okay, this is leading me somewhere. I'm gonna see this through. And as you do that, then wisdom grows and I can make better decisions because I know that work. I know what it's going to take. I know what it's going to cost me. I know what, and so I think it's to find your work. I think it's like, you got to get out there. You just got to be uncomfortable. You got to stretch. You got to grow. You got to not be afraid of what is on the other side. What is the unknown? But just take it, just run at it as best you can. And I think one of the things one of my favorite preachers says is that, I did it afraid. Because it's like we often have the excuse of fear, but it's like I did it afraid. Like I could still feel the fear because our emotions don't necessarily have to leave us for us to do something, or we will be waiting forever. I felt the fear, but I still did it afraid. Like you can still do that. And there's hope for everyone out there to know that wherever you find yourself, whatever the circumstance, there are options and there are strengths within you that will help you to achieve what you want to achieve. Now, I want to talk about a little bit, you mentioned about the DNA and changes. And one example I use with my students is that we talk about, I have a slide that shows a picture of the DNA under a microscope of the lungs. And we have a shot of a healthy lung DNA, or the cells inside of a healthy lung. And then on the other side is the cells of someone who smokes. And what we see is that on the healthy side, we see the cells are well structured, they're uniform, they'll have the same shape and size because we know that with our cells, they are formed according to the function that they will do. And so that's how we can recognize them under a microscope. You can take cells from anywhere, whether it's your skin, lungs, kidneys, whatever organ. And when you look under a microscope, you can tell where that cell comes from because of its shape. And so when we look under a microscope and we see, okay, this is healthy lungs, and then we compare it to the unhealthy lung that's been smoking, right? And we can see the deformity. We can see that some cells are split. Some cells have two DNAs in them, and so on, right? And we can see that disparity. But what happens is that you go from the healthy lung to the unhealthy lung over time. And what is setting in motion is that thing you described is like, when I started smoking, my lungs were not designed to handle the smoke. It was not designed to handle and digest the chemicals. But over time, they've had to adjust. And so the internal environment shifts. The cells will begin to look more like the environment that is made to handle the smokes. So with time, that deformity sets in because my DNA is changing because it's constantly exposed to this new environment. And it's the same with us. It's like you constantly expose yourself to the work. And I truly believe that work was meant to evolve. So, to seek ways to grow yourself and to do that work excellently. And as you do, your DNA will change, your body will change, your posture will change, the way you speak will change, the way that you think changes, because it gives you greater perspective as you begin to encounter this ability to grow yourself and to know, oh, I can do this. Okay, what else can I do? And that's how we evolve and we change and we grow into the self that we want to become and be proud of one day.
Wow, that is great. I appreciate it all, but mostly the phrase, I did it afraid. Such gold. Wow. Um, Riffing on that a bit, like when I remember most of the times that, let's say, I have had to grow, like it's there's a lot of being afraid there, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think, you know, still going ahead while you're afraid, that takes like lots of courage. It's like when you look at it from outside, it never looks that way though. Like it kind of looks like, yeah, they look like they know what they're doing. They're on top of it. It's like they got this. Like, nah, it's never like that at all. Like from the inside, it's more like, you know, all the things that could go wrong are alive for you, and you can sense them, and you're hoping your preparation will allow you to not run into any of those things. But there's even no guarantee that you won't. And you've made the commitment, you're doing this, and so you're going on with it. It's kind of like even this, like, doing this recording, it's like, will it work? What do I need to have in place? Will the internet handle what I need to do? Will I be comfortable? How will I come across? Like, you have all that. Like all that is there. It's alive with you, and you're afraid of it. But I think leaning into your courage, um, trusting and believing uh, that the goal is worth it, that what you're pushing for is worth doing just by itself, I think can be enough to allow you to withstand the fears. Not to make them go away. They're not gonna go away. And you may even finish and get an achievement in what you're pursuing. You still have the fear. So I think it's repurposing the fear to sort of like get it to push you towards where you want to go. And uh, instead of letting it hold you back, sort of putting it behind you such that it directs you towards where you need to go. Speaking of it, I recently was sort of like exploring the idea of language, and I've been talking a lot about this with Daniel on language. And it's very interesting that we like to think of language as text and just words that we're using, like speech and text. But it's much, much more than that. It's like like I described it as it's like you have to learn the language of experience, like your own language of experience, because your instance of experience is unique to you, and it works a certain way. And I guess, like, if you go back to, I think, Socrates or Aristotle, he says, you have to know thyself, right? It's like, see, working at knowing who you are is part of identifying your work, because that way you know what doesn't belong. That idea of seeing the sculpture and the marble before before they chip away what doesn't belong, so that they can reveal the sculpture. It's very much like that. I think you need to know what doesn't belong with you. And of course, like, that takes time. Like, it takes trying, and there's a lot of failure that you have to experience to know what doesn't work. Now, a lot of people will say not good things about failure, but it has a job, it has a purpose, it has a value that it adds, because through failure, that's when you know the limit. It's like, oh, this is my limit with this. I can do only up to this point. Great. So it sort of like starts to give you the shape of your limits and the limits you're going to have to surpass if you want to become better, and where they are. Because if you don't know them, then in some cases, that's when the fear sits on you and holds you down, because you have no idea of the limits. And what's that phrase? Take a leap of faith? Yes. It doesn't mean the fear is going to go away. It doesn't mean the limit is not going to be there, but you definitely have to try. And I don't know, the people who come up with the notion that there is no such thing as free will. I don't know. I would like whoever believes that statement to try overcoming their fear without willing it. Then I think that moment will show you that you actually have to apply some willingness here. It's not going to happen on its own. It's like nothing will make it happen. Like, whatever you do, there's a point where you have to make that choice. And that choice, that decision, that is you exercising that will. Um, and which is very much the work you're doing. Like, it's like all of your work is like if you remember, if you look back in your history, it's like a history of making choices and decisions. And in most cases, the choices you may think you're choosing what you like, but it's more like choosing the consequences you can tolerate. It's not like this. It's not like you have consequence-free choices. No, there's always consequences. And I think some of these we get afraid of consequences and go like, oh no, if I do that, it means this, it means that, and I'm not willing to suffer that. Um, but there is no consequence-free choices. They all have their consequences. But I think that's where you need bravery, like, being brave and being courageous to face the consequence that you're choosing.
Mm.
And the more you do that, the then the more you surpass your limit, the more you surpass, the more of yourself you unlock, the more
Mm.
gifts you gain that you can give. And like we're sitting here having this conversation. It's not like anybody's gonna pay us to do this. It's not like we've been told to do this. No, it's like there's a thing within us that makes this
Yeah.
just the right thing to do, because like, wow, a privilege to have a conversation about work and doing a deep dive with a good friend. Why would I turn that down, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah,
much to learn.
that's so great. And I love how you describe that fear. And I think I was kind of thinking, and I recently caught up with a friend who I haven't seen in maybe 10 years. And she was talking to me about how I was asking about the last workplace. She doesn't work in the same place anymore, but within the same hospital. And I was asking her about the other people, and she's like, oh, yeah, that person's still there, and that person's still there. And I was like, wow, such a long time to be at one place. And I don't think it was my judgment that you can't be at one place for a long time, but it just helped. It just made me reflect on my life and thinking, wow, I've changed so many different positions. Like I've had so many different positions, and I seem to change at least every 4 years. Except with this last job, which has really allowed me to evolve within it. But I've noticed that when I took stock of why did I need to shift, or why did I need to constantly pursue a new position? And it was that desire to grow. Like I was just desperate to grow and to find ways in which I was constantly stretched. I wanted to be stretched. Now, there are other things that I can tell you I didn't want to be stretched or uncomfortable within, like finances. I don't want to be at the edge with zero in my account, or, I'm not one that has taken big risks when it comes to finances. But when it comes to work, oh yeah, definitely. Like I'll take big risk and I'll just switch positions. And I just always had this faith that there's something there that's going to work out. It's going to, something else is going to pop up, and it has. And I think it's like that when we look at our work. Some people will not pursue work because of that fear of what's going to happen. Or if I fail. And you said that, failure is part of the journey. And I think when we honor the failure, because failure is the greatest teacher, it will teach you what is it that you can do different next time. And one thing that for me has made it really difficult to not make mistakes and not fail is this. I heard someone say that what happens when you get to the end of your life and you ask yourself the question of, what did I do with my life? Did I achieve the assignment that I was assigned to do? That to me is terrifying. I'm terrified to say, no, I didn't achieve, or to look back and know that I didn't even try. Like it just scares me. And so for some people, it might be that question of, if you get to the end of your life and you look back, will you be able to wholeheartedly say that you've achieved all that you wanted or desired to do? And from within you, something will speak and tell you either way, right? Because our own bodies will speak to us, and our history will speak to us. Is that, inbuilt spiritual being that is speaking to you all the time. And so that for me just terrified me. It's like, I cannot just sit comfortable because I don't want to have that question hanging over me and that regret of not having achieved the things that I knew were on my heart or desires that I had. And I think when you think about your work as within the lifetime that you have and you place value on what you do every single day, I think then your perception begins to shift and you begin to become someone who channels an energy towards something greater than yourself. And when you value the work that's greater than yourself, then yourself benefits also. Like there's just, I don't know how to describe it, but as I've transitioned through many different jobs, I'm just at this place where I see the value that I have to offer to other people and how empowering that is, not only for myself, but for them. And I recently had a conversation with a student who's really struggling, got kicked out of home and is really just, one of those like students that doesn't have a future, doesn't think that they can do anything, yeah. And I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, you have so much potential. Like there is so much potential within this woman to achieve the things that are on her heart. She has so much energy. She has so many gifts. She's incredible at doing her assignments. And yet she's stuck in this idea that what the world says about her is her limited capacity, right? Because she's, kicked out by her parents. Her parents think that she's hopeless and she's, reckless with her life or whatever. And so she's formed this idea that I will never do anything because those around me that love me, that are meant to be my family, say these things about me. And, it's evidence that I've been kicked out, that, I'm just not going to make good decisions and I haven't done well. But I look at her and I think, wow, I wish I was back at your age to make more better use of my time, right? And so we learn these lessons as we go and as we get older, that time is so valuable. And I do hope that if someone hears this, wherever they're at in their lifetime, that they'll really sit with themselves and ask the question of, will I be comfortable with the answer I have to give at the end of my life when I consider what I could have achieved? Will I be satisfied? Will I be okay? Will I be at peace with that? Yeah, I think it just shifts the way you can perceive work, because work is really everything you do. It's in your daily life. It's in what you choose as a career. But it's so vital. It's vital not just to our economy. It's vital to you as a person, that you give, and you give so towards others. You give relentlessly, and I find that when you perceive it that way, it grants you energy to keep giving. But you will know what you can give of. Like with myself, I'm an introvert. I cannot sit in social conversations for hours because I get exhausted. My battery runs low. But if I was to sit on Zoom like we do now and have a conversation, I could go for ages. But in a social environment, like if we go to a party or get together, I could not sustain conversation for a long time because that, for whatever reason, physically exhausts me. So find the work that you can give and really make sure that it gives to others and it makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, wow, that's very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's very inspiring as well. And I completely agree. Like you have to find that work that you can give. It reminds me of the gifts, takes me back to the gifts. And I'm very cognizant of the time. So I think we should start to wrap it up. But just before we do that, like just something to comment about the gifts. I do agree with you. It's like you described there when you're doing your work, let's say at the job, the way you're perceiving it is through what you have to offer. It's like it's not just the job description, right? It's like, yeah, there's a role that I play here, but there's a way I show up, and when I do what I need to do, um, it's different when someone else does it, right? That point of difference, that's sort of like the signature of your gifts, if I may put it that way. And so, yes, like that resonates with me, and I completely agree with it. It's through the gift giving that you also receive the gift of becoming more of
Mm.
yourself. Yeah, and if you don't give those gifts, then I don't know, you're not. It's kind of like you always feel like you're not achieving your potential, and it's more like a felt thing. It's more like, that question you ask, will you have done the work? You always feel inadequate, that you haven't, because you can see the horizon. It's like, oh yeah, I could have done that. It's like, oh, and you may even fall into like self-criticism and go like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I? Uh,
Mm.
and that frustration is because you know what what you could be doing, or where you need to push, which limit you need to push. So it's not because we don't know. it's it's not because we don't know. And I think even doing these kinds of conversations is sort of like trying to give at least that courage to share some insights, to share, to start the conversation, to get attention, to kind of
Mm.
like be pointed in this direction. So yeah, I really appreciate you having come on and had this conversation. But just before we drop off, I wanted to ask you to maybe share a little bit about what you're doing in your work, whatever you're comfortable sharing, to sort of like, bring it all together, because this was all about your work at the start.
Oh, I was so sorry. I thought this was about like before I do that, which I'll do very succinctly, but I just wanted to mention also with fear is that your fear will evolve. We talk about engaging with something. So once I know my purpose, or I know what I'm drawn towards, and as I become more intentional with taking steps towards that, your fear will evolve, because once you get to the edge of a mountain, like when I had to move out, and there was that rental crisis, home crisis, it was awful. But I just heard this message dropped into my spirit, and it said, if you don't take the leap now to jump off this cliff, do you think you'll ever take the leap? Like, do you have faith to take this leap? And so I took the leap, but then once I took that leap, it was like, oh, I can move again, and I can move again. So I just found the strength. It wasn't easy, but I think it's really important to know that your fear will evolve. It's not the same fear. And as you're reaching for greater things, of course, that anxiety is going to be there. It's going to be in a different capacity for sure. And it's going to be now towards different things, because what you've already done, you have experience and history with. And so when you have been able to break through that, you don't hang back at that same cliff, right? You've overcome that cliff, but it's going to be a bigger cliff and a bigger. And so it evolves. And I think it's important to know that you can, if you've overcome that last cliff, you can do the next and the next. And that's what really helps us as humans, propel us forward towards all that is there for us, because we were born to live an abundant life. Um, and finally, my work. So I'm a nurse. I've been nursing for about 15 years. And within that, I changed a lot of different roles. So I've done nursing on the floor in within different wards and specialties. And then, of course, I teach nursing currently, which I really love. And the ability to connect with students. And I was just pondering, even this last 2 weeks, I was like really appreciating and reminiscing on how incredible my journey with teaching has been, because initially I didn't think that I was going to be a teacher. And someone just said, oh, you should apply. And someone else encouraged me, saying that you have all the skills to do this. So I was like, okay, I'll apply. But once I started, and being into it 5 years now, I look back and I'm like, wow, I've grown so much. I've developed systems that help me to keep track of my students and, do the job well. But I'm becoming passionate about what I give. what I give to my students and what I give to others. And I realized that I was always passionate about giving them a taste of what nursing is, but I want to develop nurses who have heart. I think that was at the core of why I wanted to teach and why I was really passionate and really intense in my first few years of teaching. And I think really shifted how I live my life. And now I'm pursuing other things, and I've done coaching courses to help me to coach others and to be within a different arena, empowering people to live their best life.
Well, thanks, Juana. It's great work you're doing, and please keep doing it. And I will catch you on the next one.
Thank you.